Hello there, Internet, and you beautiful creatures of the beyond. I missed you all. Now, I am going to present to you a very interesting concept about Noosphere. And you'll be like, what is that? Well, my intelligent and amazing friend, or amigo, you are going to discover that Noosphere is actually a science that is well, being developed in a sciencey way. But I actually found out about the noosphere principle through games. And one particular game that tackles this is the Stalker games. And in the lore of the Stalker games, there is this idea that scientists discovered the noosphere and they wanted to manipulate it because we'll get to that in a moment. But another place you might find noosphere as a base of the lore would be in the 40k universe, Warhammer. And if you're familiar with the concept of how the Emperor of Mankind came to be, you kind of get the idea. So, in simple terms, Noosphere is kind of a global consciousness, let's call it. And this guy, or one of the guys that is working on this, a researcher called Roger Nelson, he's part of this interesting organization which is called the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research, which is also called PEER. um, and he's on the Global Consciousness Project. So they developed this experiment based on RNG. And when I mean RNG, random number generator, I really mean random number generator because they use specific devices that measure through some special slits how photons go left or right. So basically, they're doing an analog system where you get a 1 or a 0, or a false or a positive, a Boolean value. And basically, in RNG, you kind of expect 50-50 chances to get one side or the other. And from their experiments, they have determined that based on how the population, a large group of the population, reacts to a certain event, these values are well, they're changing, but they're kind of influenced in a way. So they're starting to variate in such a way that you get more ones than zeros or more zeros than one, and it's totally misunderstood. And right now, when I dwelled further into this, I am a bit skeptical here and there. They have like some really interesting papers written on their website. I'm gonna post the links and everything. But I found it really fascinating. Um, Although personally, I think they are kind of developing this hypothesis. And before you jump to the conclusion, oh, hypothesis or theory is just something anybody can come up with. No, well, a hypothesis and like a scientific hypothesis and a scientific theory usually are based on peer-reviewed papers, on experiments, something that can be demonstrable and reproduced. So that is the big difference between the scientific method and our own opinions, which are just guesses. So they're not guessing, they're taking educated mm, premonitions, let's call them. Of course, reading through their site, they themselves say that this is not um, a 100% proof that there is a global consciousness. They just discovered through this use of these tools that there is a force out there that we just discovered recently, and it's through quantum mechanics. It's pretty complicated. I don't fully understand it, but quantum mechanics in itself is ambiguous in many areas. So sometimes things are kind of impossible to demonstrate directly. But in my opinion, what they discovered is not a global consciousness, as they, well, perhaps they have more data that indicates that, but personally, I think they have just discovered uh, basically like how we discovered air. We knew there was something out there, we just didn't understand it. And when science has developed enough, we understood that molecules of oxygen in combination with other gases create the oxygen that we breathe, the the gases actually that we inhale and our lungs require in order to function correctly. So I suppose this is another sort of very difficult to detect force, but they are correct that it can be influenced based on our actions or global actions that happen around the world. On the other hand, I kind of think like when you're gathering a mass of people, well, think about it like you're centralizing, for example, cars, and they're producing a lot of emissions. And of course, if you're going to measure the um, dioxide in the air, then you're going to know to see that there is a concentration, and it kind of affects the rest of the atmosphere. So perhaps maybe when a lot of people are congregating, their heat or their, well, I don't know, volume is displacing something and in this energy, and this energy reacts in that way. So that's my take on it. Of course, this has a long way before we can develop even better technology to measure these things and understand how these forces work, because they're definitely more related to reality than we can fully understand. We barely understand the principles of gravity, and we still don't fully know all of the things that gravity is composed of. But slowly, with time, we are gathering more information. So yeah, but I really like this concept of a global consciousness, because in a way it says like we're all interconnected, and the moment you are millions, well, not millions, but well, in space, millions of kilometers away is a short distance. Well, let's say a few hundred kilometers away from your loved ones, and you have this feeling that something is wrong, and you call and you see that there was an accident or something. Well, I hope nothing wrong happens in anyone's life, but you get the idea. And then you know that that feeling kind of made you know in that moment that, oh, I am really connected to that person, so I really feel that. It's a nice way to say, yeah, we're interconnected and we have that je ne sais quoi. But in reality, all of these things like soul and deja vu and premonitions, they're not fully defined as facts. And maybe they will never be, because we have no proof that they exist. We only created them as a concept to kind of have as a placeholder for what we do not yet understand. Just like in the fifth game, like when we played, the guys were talking about the humors. And in the past, in medieval times, humors was actually the explanation for a lot of illnesses. It was like this force that nobody understood why people get sick, but they were trying to get it out of the body through various barbaric ways. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. So kind of the same things happening right now. We are not fully understanding the science and all of the forces that keep this world tangled together. So we're kind of putting some preliminary placeholders out there for us to kind of make a sense of something. But yeah, I think that eventually we might discover some interesting things. Although what they are also implying here is that we can kind of foresee the future by measuring these discrepancies in the balance of these RNG numbers to kind of know if something is going to happen. But then again, even in their papers, they're saying it can be a celebration or it can be a catastrophe. So in both places it applies, just it's not very regular. Then other scientists that criticize these papers and this work say that, well, it's easy to see things in random generated numbers when you really try to appoint a meaning to it. Even in the uh, pandemic that happened recently, and we all know about it, of course, they were trying to take these measurements and it wasn't very conclusive. So even they say that they are taking this with a pinch of salt because it's still pretty new, although they have been doing it for more than 20 years. So, but again, in science, 20 years of measurements is a small period. So we need better equipment to even improve upon these measurements and understanding all of these principles better together. Anyway, it's gonna take time. That's what I'm saying. Um, yeah. Oh, what I wanted to relate to this principle is that in a way we do look at life and we do not fully understand it, of course, because if life was simple, we would all get bored of it. Maybe we would be happy, but it would be boring. There would be nothing challenging. So when you look at these things, they look kind of like shortcuts, but in a way, I do see a reasoning why people would want some closure to get over difficult periods and have somebody to empathize with them and understand them. So when you apply this, well, I wouldn't call it necessarily pseudoscience, but since we do not have a definitive principle of what we're really experiencing, it's more of a, let's call it an illusion that helps us. So whatever gets us through, it's helpful for us. At the end of the day, reality is what we perceive it because we perceive it through our senses. And we never know if what we experience outside of our bodies is truly real or not. We can only trust our senses because that is all we have. So I believe that at the end of the day, it really does not matter what reality is indeed real, as long as we make it a pleasant reality for ourselves. So, if there is a global consciousness and we are all this super amazing energy that is beyond our bodies, that is a nice concept I would like to revel in. But again, until it is proven, it's going to be only a theory. Well, not even a theory. It's less than a theory right now. But yeah, nice principle. So, catch you guys next time. Stay awesome, stay safe, and be happy. Bye, 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 bye.